really fast.
Now, so Egypt seems to be not even just for what we're talking about in the Judeo-Christian concept, but like writers like Diodorus of Sicily really likes wants people to know Egypt is a special place for religious purposes.
Yeah.
The ideas of religion are coming out of Egypt all over the place. What do you think that do you think this is kind of the same thing happening with these other religions in the Levant? Maybe.
I think everywhere, every place has religion. Everywhere where there's people, there's going to be some spirituality first. Anywhere where there's quote unquote civilized people, there's going to be religion, something that's institutionalized. And Herodotus went to Egypt in the 5th century and said that Egypt was more religious than any place on earth. And so I would say that the Egyptians excelled at creating two things, and they're not mutually exclusive. These two things, they can be separated from one another. So number one, the Egyptians created a skilled priestly status group who passed their knowledge on generationally, and they built upon that knowledge such that you could do more and more and more with it. So it wasn't just an oral tradition where you get it all in your head and you pass it on to the next shaman, which simplifies and limits what you're able to create, reproduce, and connect with the next generation. It limits the number of people you can work with to create your magical, spiritual, religious institution. It can grow. And so, and I'll make it very simple about why. In ancient Egypt, the geography is such that you're protected on all four sides and you have a continuity of leadership. You don't have a whole lot of external invasions, and then inside you have the Nile, and so you don't have a lot of internal competition. And within that more safe geographic landscape, you don't have a lot of warlording and competition. You don't have people trying to steal somebody else's farm. Everybody's kind of drunk and fat and happy on their cheap grains and doing okay. And in that world space with a big population where everyone's drunk and full, Egyptian rulers spend more on weapons of the mind than they do on weapons of the body.
Hmm.
And so if you're in Mesopotamia or Syria or the Italian peninsula or Greece, if you are a leader, you need to innovate on how you're going to get a flaming rock into somebody's fortress. You're going to create some sort of siege weaponry, maybe. You're going to create siege bridges. You're going to create new kinds of arrows. You're going to create all kinds of stuff. You're going to create the chariot. You're going to use the horse in a different way. And there's all kinds of innovation and material investment in these things. Egyptians invested less in such things because they didn't need to. But what they did need to invest in to keep their large population of drunk, happy people in check was a whole bunch of weapons of the mind. And so this is the second part. So if the first part is Egypt is able to well, it overlaps. Okay, but they're able to invest in this priestly ongoing group. They're pouring money into. They're pouring money into temples. They're pouring money into pyramid spaces. They're investing into this, and they're putting R&D into it. Whatever you believe in ritual magic, spirituality, all of these things, it's, if you have believers in there and people think they're getting something out of their ritual investment, then you're going to put more R&D into it and be like, oh, we created this new ritual that gets us this new thing or whatever it is. um and so you create these weapons of the mind so that people believe that the guy who built that pyramid is superhuman and that he is of the gods. And otherwise, how could that pyramid come into being, right? You have extraordinary structures in other places, but there's not the time from warlording to put as much into it. So there's that. The second thing that the Egyptians are really excelling at doing is making that exclusive. So so you only allow some people to be involved in this game. It's a social exclusionary practice. So when you're in middle school and some kids are popular and then you're not at that lunch table. It's kind of like that. So there's a top 5% of ancient Egyptian society who are all initiated into these religious systems. And other people, they have separate religious traditions, but they're looking up and they're not a part of all of that. And so Egypt And I want to separate the two because I don't want to say that the power systems are always making the religious systems without value, but but they often do, right? So I'm saying that to be respectful of the Egyptian religious traditions as they exist, but socially, as they're used as weapons of power and control, they often subvert these religious traditions. But in short, it means that from the perspective of a Levantine person, or a Mesopotamian person, or somebody coming from Greece or Rome, they're going to look at Egypt and be like, damn, look at all of that they have built about religion. They know more than we know, it seems. They have more names of more gods. They know what the afterlife is. They've mapped it out. They know step A to Z. They know it all. They know how to purify a person. They know the spell for turning somebody into a flame in the afterlife. They know how to connect with the dead. They know all these things. And so for somebody coming from a tradition where not as much has been invested by the state, however you define that, it's going to seem like you're coming from a more simplistic religious system and that the Egyptians have it figured out. Add to that the social exclusivity component, and Egyptians are very simple. Or humans are very simple people, right? We humans are like, oh my God, the Egyptians not only have it figured out, but not everyone gets access to it. And I'm going to join this cult, this ISIS cult, and I'm going to get like a Scientology cult. I'm going to get to the highest levels and I'm going to figure it all out. And so it's kind of like the Egyptians have hacked how to get people to believe in religion
Yeah,
and to compete with each other through religion more than anybody else. And to say that Christianity did not feed off of that at some point would be ridiculous. Which
yeah,
is why Jesus comes in and he's like, we should all be poor. We should all give away our money. We should all do this. And then what does that translate into in my world and the world you grew up with, into a Vatican covered with gold, covered with precious incense and imported goods and colonizing the world and all of this stuff. And yes, Pope Francis is different. He's like going to wear his simple shoes, but that's not what the last Pope did. And they're all covering themselves in this, incredible silk and satin. This is not what Jesus preached, but that doesn't
right.
matter. That's the ritual of Egypt. That's the ritual of power. And so you can say, oh my God, Jesus is there certain things, saying certain things. But when you institutionalize, that's when Egypt really comes in. And you start to, does Jesus say, oh, you need to have the incense in the four directions? No. Does he say you have to do my spell in a certain way? Because what is the Eucharist creation but a spell, Egyptian style, right?
Right.
This is all, in my opinion, based on Egyptian magical tradition. And that's what the mass is. That's what an exorcism is. There's all kinds of Christian magic that if you become a priest, you become initiated into and you understand how these things work. Last rites, it's a magical rite. And the way you set up the sacred circle and the four directions, that's all ancient Egyptian, all of it. What you wear, the hat you put on, the stuff you do. So I would say it's about the institutionalization rather than the first guy, Jesus, whoever he was as a historical person, and we could argue that for forever, rather than him, it's the co-option of his message and then the institutionalization of it. So they're two different things, if that makes any sense.